Well, welcome to this YouTube video. I thank you for joining me to spend a little bit of your time. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I got into freeze drying. Well, my wife grew up with canning her whole life. Her mother was a builder and went through the Great Depression. My father was a builder and went through the Great Depression also. So that had a large impact on their lives that affected them, the rest of them. So when we grew up, the Depression was not just something in the history books. We were told about it from firsthand experience. So, we have a close connection to it. We do water bath can and we pressure can. And while those methods are good, we also freeze. The limitations that we have found with canning: one, dairy products are not approved. Number two, the availability of the jars can be sketchy sometimes. And three, actually there's four reasons. Three, the weight and space that the canning jars take up. Because if any of you know canning, you have jars that are filled and you put them on a shelf. That shelf has to be fairly sturdy because of the weight added of all those jars and food. So we had space limitations and also, weight restrictions really a little bit because the shelves that I would have to build. And fourth, the final reason that we really added freeze drying to our method was the nutrient preservation. You lose more nutrients with canning than you do with freeze drying. So all of these factors combined motivated us to get a freeze dryer. And the freeze dryer that we chose was the Harvest Right size medium. And we did get the Premier pump based on the research that we did, that was a better investment. Now those are the reasons that we got into it. And the ultimate reason was to feed our bellies. And that was the main motivator. Once I started in on the process of freeze drying, I started the first few batches. I was looking around trying to see how people did it. I read the manual and see people's different methods that they used and processes. So the first couple batches I did, and I went by the basics of you go by the time, you have the extra time, you feel if the food feels cold in any spot, and you kind of go with that method. And I was just uncomfortable with that. I come from a manufacturing background. My history is I started as an operator and ended up as a department manager in the plastic manufacturing field, working in medical, tier 1 automotive, which is where we ship parts directly to the assembly line and factory, and ending up in precision molding, where everything has very tight tolerances that have to be maintained for the parts to work properly. With this background, it was drilled into my head through many years of you want to have a process or method that is stable, repeatable, and was able to be documented. And the reason for that is, if you have a problem without the documentation, how do you know where the problem came in and what to look at for the cause of the problem? Also, if your process is not consistent and repeatable, you're adding in a lot of variances in there in how things are done. So you're adding in variables, let's say. It's not just looking at the front end, which is the food. We had what we call the flow chart, which we would diagram material raw coming in one side, how it was handled in the manufacturing stage of our department, how it went to the next department and what was done, then to assembly, then to shipping, and onto the truck. But the thing is, with the flow chart in the companies that I've been with that were successful, that wasn't where they stopped. I had the opportunity to go to the actual assembly line where our parts were used, because the company believed that if we could see the conditions with which the parts were being inspected and put on the vehicles and how things were done, we could take that information back to the plant and the shift and see, okay, we're inspecting with one method and one type of lighting. They're inspecting it differently with different lighting at different angles and positions. We need to at least replicate what they're doing, if not improve on it, so we can detect more defects, so we could reduce the number of defects that we ultimately sent to the assembly line. So my process of thinking kicked in was, okay, I have product, food that I'm bringing in. Ultimately, at the far end, how am I going to use that food? Under what conditions am I going to use that food? And that helped me develop a method of labeling and process of how I go through the process of freeze drying. All of this also gives me the ability to, as I was taught, it is much more efficient to process in quality rather than inspect in quality. And by that I mean, one is proactive, one is reactive. You've already made the parts, now you're going to check them to see if they're good. And what that process is, you will get some defects that come through. But if you see the defects, then you evaluate them and you try to go back to the process of making them and see if there is any way that you can improve the process to reduce the likelihood of that defect reoccurring. So in that sense, you're processing in quality. If your reaction was, okay, we know we have a defect in this part, we need to tell the operators and the line help to inspect closer for this defect. Is that really the right method to use? Because if you're inspecting for it, you're throwing away time and money and energy, where you could go to the front end and try to correct the issue and monitor for that issue in the process, limiting those defects. The second thing is documenting is very important. If you are producing a item and you don't record the process parameters that you define, let's say you go through the process, you freeze dry it, bag it, and put it into your storage method. You go in, you pull a bag out, you look at the bag, and if you don't have any other method, you look at it, you open it up, and all of a sudden you find that bag of food is bad. You either find that it's rancid, you find that it has moisture that has caused the food to go bad. Well, if you have, let's say the average, you put the date of manufacture, the date of that you processed it, and what is in it, where do you go from there? If you haven't really kept any records, how do you know what you did to produce this part or this bag of food? Second, and this is possibly even more important, because in canning, botulism is a very real issue that can happen. And there are visual cues that you're taught, and my wife has had it drilled into her head when she was younger, of evaluating the jar before she even touched it and opened it. With bags of freeze-dried, we kind of need to come up with that same method of evaluating. But once we evaluate and we decide that it is bad, how many more bags from that load do you have? Do you have 4? One per tray? Do you have multiple per tray? If you don't know that, is it just that one bag that's bad, or are all those bags from that batch suspect? And if you know, and you can go back and see, that bag was from batch number 10, it was from tray number 4, and you have your documentation, you can look back and go, okay, tray number 4 had a lower water content removal percentage than 1, 2, and 3. Maybe I need to be more careful in my process of monitoring water removal to make sure that they're more consistent with the other trays if I'm running the same item through the whole load. And it also gives you an ability to go back and say, I had 3 of these bags on this tray. At the minimum, I need to go back and check those other 2 bags that I have to verify they're good. My view on this, we're preparing food at this point for events, whether that be natural events, man-made events, economic, okay? When we go to use the food that we're producing right now, it's going to be under a stressful environment. We need an easy method of storage, easy method of retrieval, and verifying the product that we have if we have some bad ones. So that was my motivator in coming up with the method I'm going to show you. It also helps me to make sure that I am using the machine to the most efficient manner that I can. And if there are things that I'm doing that are not efficient, how can I improve that? Some of you, it may not make a difference. You get a load, you're happy. For me, because of the manufacturing and being lean and just in time, meant continual improvement, continual monitoring to make the process more efficient, as not just a one-time thing, but ongoing all the time. Well, I think I've rambled on enough about why I did it. Let's start looking at how I do it. Okay? We're going to bring up my Excel spreadsheet, which is what I use, and we're going to start with my process sheet. This sheet I have printed out, it's on a clipboard, and I have it beside the machine, and I record data that's pertinent to what I need to record. And then I input this data into the spreadsheet. So let's start from the top left. You can see we have batch number. I record whatever batch number I'm on, whether it's 10, 12, 100, whatever. Next over, I record the date that I started the batch. So if I started a batch today, it would be 4/1/23. It's not the day that it finishes, but it's the day that it started. The item description of what is in the load. If it is a single item load, like let's say I just put in all of broccoli, I would put down broccoli florets if that's what the item was. And this is at the front end. The process time, I don't know until the process is finished. So I can't input that data yet. Again, the kilowatt usage, I can't input that data until the process is finished. But I do monitor that because I have a usage meter that I plugged into the wall. It was $10 from Amazon, and it gives me how many kilowatts I've used for that load. And we'll go into the metrics of why I feel that's important. You can come down where I have tray number. I divide it up by trays 1, 2, and 3. And as I go, you'll see why that's important. I put down the gross before, which means I take a scale, and I'm using grams in my calculations and in my sheets. So I put the scale with the food on it. I weigh the whole thing, and that weight is what I put in onto the sheet in this area, is the gross weight before. In this area, I'm looking for the tare weight, which means how much did the tray, and if I'm using dividers or silicon pads or whatever, how much did that weigh? So I know in the formulas that I've driven, I take my gross weight, subtract out my weight of the tare or the pan and the dividers and whatever, subtract that out from the gross, and I have how much product I've put in that tray. We come over here to dryer checks. I use the method of doing a weight check after the machine says it's dry and decides it's going into extra dry time. I will, lower the time till the machine stops, pull the trays out, and I will record the weight of the trays. Once I record the weight of the trays, I may switch tray 1 with tray 2 and tray 3 with tray 4. Put them back in the dryer, add another 2 hours of drying time. Once the second drying time is finished, I will weigh them again. And my personal target is that no more than one tray is 1 gram different from what that weight was. So what that means is 3 of my trays weigh the same amount as the weight before. One of them can be 1 gram higher. That is the checks that I'm using now. I'm not saying it won't change as I see a better method that I can implement in my process. I am in the process now of changing things on how I do things. I'm not quite ready to show you my visual process totally yet because it's still in development. Okay, I've grown up and I've learned that you don't reinvent the wheel. I look on YouTube and I see people who are doing things and I evaluate, can I make use of what they're doing? Is it logical? Is it safe? And if it is, then I can implement parts of what they're doing. And I may look at another person and say, what they're doing in this area is very good. I can implement that section of what they're doing, but I may not like the rest of what they're doing, so I may discard that. And by using this method, I'm gleaning what I consider the best from other people who have done this before me, and they've basically invented the wheel for themselves. So why should I reinvent the wheel and learn the same things they've learned? Try using that when you're going through evaluating what people are doing and designing your own process that you use. So let's just assume that the dryer checks came out and we've written down our process time and our kilowatt usage. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. Before we get to the final dryer check, when we put down the batch number, the date, the item description, the gross weight, and the tare when we load the trays, I will go to my process sheet and enter that data. That way, when I do get my weights dialed in where they're correct, I can just enter what little bit of data I need, print out my labels, and process the bags into storage. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our what I call my master worksheet, and it is for a load that has the same item through all 4 trays. And we're just going to pull up some numbers and hypotheticals. Okay, let's use today's date, 4/1/23, and with this form, all the yellow fields are fields that you enter data into. The red fields are fields that I consider important data that I need to look at a little bit more closely to see where they fall. And we're going to kind of talk about those as we go through these fields that we fill in. The batch number, let's go with batch 12. The item, okay, we're going to use raw chicken. And I do use the military way of describing items. So when you write it, you read it backwards, it makes sense. But you put what it is and then descriptors after it. So if you read it, you see chicken raw, it doesn't sound right. But if you read it raw chicken, it makes perfect sense. Did I have the chicken pre-frozen? Yes or no? It does make a difference because pre-frozen will help reduce your processing time. And it's a variable that I want to know because let's say I process this batch with it not being pre-frozen. And I want to know if it actually does make a difference. I will process another batch to the same weight of the same item and I'll pre-freeze it. Run the batch through just like normal and see if there are any differences in process time, power consumption, and if one is cheaper than the other. And my presupposition is that pre-frozen is going to be cheaper. Let's say I run that test and it comes out that raw, non-frozen is actually quicker to process and more efficient because it uses less energy and less time. Then I will know, okay, from now on I'm going to process unfrozen chicken. Here I'm just going to say yes, it is pre-frozen because most of the items that I do are pre-frozen. When we come over here, I cannot enter the time because the process isn't over. I cannot add the kilowatts because the process isn't over. The bags, I can look at the trays based on previous knowledge of, I've got this much material, chicken, in the tray. I want to package it for family meals. I want it for 3 servings for our family based on what we eat. So I take, okay, I've got 3 servings in a bag. How many bags do I need to fill for one tray? So if I say I have quart bags and I want 3 servings per bag, and I look at it and I go, on this tray I can get 4 bags per tray. So my overall quantity of bags that I will need will be 4 bags per tray multiplied by 4. So the quantity of bags is 16. Then we come over to storage location. My method for storage location is based on the assumption that if I am going to use this food, it's going to be in a stressful time because of a natural event, political, economic, whichever. So we're not going to be thinking clearly. Second, we may not have access to the computer to draw the data from of where it was stored. So the method that I came up with, if you look towards the bottom tabs here, I have storage methods of drinks, MREs, meals that are ready to eat, vegetables, starches, raw protein, cooked protein, fruits, and treats. Those are the criteria of how I'm storing my food, or the categories that I'm storing my food. Am I locked into those categories? No. If I find a need for another category, I will add it. But with this item, it's raw chicken, so we're going to store it in raw protein. And the tote that I'm putting it in is tote 1. And I will just go raw protein tote 1, tote 2, etc., until I have all the protein stored. What that does is, let's say that I'm stressed, my wife is stressed, and we need to get something to eat, and we do not have the computer. We just walk into the area where we have the tote stored, and we look and say, okay, I need raw protein today. And I go to a protein tote, and on the tote it will be labeled raw protein 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if it's an event where it's stressful, we're not going to really care on which tote we pull from. So we just pull the easiest one we could from raw protein. If we were there and we were looking for an MRE, a meal that we just had to add water to or eat, freeze-dried, which we've done. Well, I can't say my family's done, I've done. We can go to it, we can get to it quickly, and we can consume it and use it. That's the reason behind my storage method. Again, here we have the tray, and I'm just going to pull numbers out. 1762 for the tray, gross weight. And I'm going to vary these just a little bit so you see what happens. So that is our gross weight. Tare weight is the weight of the pan and the dividers or the pads if you use any. You'd weigh the total weight and you'd put that here. And the weights of the pans by themselves do change. I've seen them from roughly 634 to around 642. 8 grams of weight is not much, but to me, I want to be as accurate as I can be because that affects other equations. But in this case, I'm just going to use 635 as my tare to make it easier. So at this point right now, we can see that I've loaded my trays, my tray 1 to 99.4% efficiency. What I base the efficiency on is the 10-pound load that Harvest Right recommends as the upper limit. And I just took that, divided it by 4, which is 2.5 pounds, converted that to grams, which equals 1,134 grams. So a very simple calculation. Here we come to calories per gram. You may not need this. I use it because knowing the calories per gram, I can calculate how much it costs me for every calorie that I have in the bag. And that will help me know that I am putting up the most food for the money that I can. And sometimes it surprises you, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I also have another tab that's set up for calories per gram. And if you come down to my tabs, you'll see that I have one called Calorie Counts. When you open it up, you can see on the left here, I have items. And you can see I've got white rice, canned tuna, black olives, etc. And next to it, I have grams and I have calories. On the labels of these items, you will see the calorie counts for a certain predetermined weight. And there is no set weight or standard. It seems to be they go by one serving size. And that varies depending on the item that it is. Because you can look here, you can see white rice is 158 grams for a serving, while black olives is approximately 3.8 grams. So the way it's set up is I take the information that they print on the label, I key in how many grams it is, how many calories it is, and the red box figures out the calories per gram. So we were talking raw chicken, and here is raw chicken. The calorie per gram is 0.91. So we go back to the working sheet and we enter 0.91. We already discussed that we were going for 3 servings per bag. So where it says servings per bag, we're going to enter in 3. Now we're coming over to the cost factor. So with the chicken, how much did it cost you to buy that raw chicken? I'm going to just say $16 for 10 pounds of raw chicken. The next factor that we're going to look at is the price per kilowatt hour. Where I am, on the back of the power bill, they have a price of, so much per kilowatt hour. For me, it is 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So I'm going to enter 10. And price per bag. We agreed that we were going to put the raw chicken in quart bags, so we need to know how much each quart bag costs us. And also, with just-in-time manufacturing, you needed to know what your inventory levels were, not just in products that you were shipping, but in items that you needed to make those products if you didn't manufacture them. Because if you were working on an item and you ran out of a needed item to make the finished product, that could cause you to miss a shipment. So I look at it the same way with this. I have recorded the Mylar bags, top line in 5 Mylar quart bags. I purchased for $241. I got a quantity of 450 bags. And that will make my price per bag at 54 cents. I also record where I purchased it. It was from Amazon. And I keep a running inventory of what I have on hand so that I know when I get to a certain level I need to reorder. I haven't worked it into my formula, into my system yet, my reorder point, that it flags me. But right now it's just me visually looking at it. You can see at this point right now I have 401 quart bags right now. So I'm good. If I use 16 in this batch, I just come over to used, enter 16, and I have 385. Oops, sorry. I take that number, enter it over here, and delete this, and that is my new available inventory. And I can, you can see my gallon Mylar bags. And as I accumulate different sizes, and mostly I'm using this for disposable goods, bags, oxygen absorbers, Teflon tape for my sealer and heat bands for my sealer. I may use it for heating pads for my freeze dryer. It may be a spare heat pump, hose, gasket, different items that I have on hand for breakage as well as usage. I probably won't put prices of food on here because food is in a state of flux all the time. It's very unstable at this point. So what I'm doing is, as I buy my food, I'm recording the prices and I write them on the bags. So if I have a bag of frozen peas that costs me $1.99, when I pull that bag out, I know what I have invested in that bag for item cost. So let's go back to the working sheet. We know that our quart bags cost us 54 cents a piece. We're going to come down to price per bag and we're going to enter 54. This box, like it says, is for notes. So if I do something or I notice something, like let's say I didn't have the material layered and I wasn't to the 99% efficiency on weight, I could write it down. Or if this was the first time that I was processing the raw chicken at 99% efficiency, I could write, chicken was cut less than 1/4 inch and layered up on the tray, even or slightly above the sides of the tray. Gives me a little bit of information of how I did it, so I can fall back on that in evaluating what I did. So we've got this information all filled out. Now we have to wait until we come to our first dryer check. So we'd go back to the sheet, write down our first dryer check, go through until they were within the range that we had set. Once it was, we would pull it out, we would enter our dryer checks here, and we would enter the final dryer weight in the gross after. And I'm just going to pull numbers out of my head. I'm not sure if they're accurate, okay? But we're going to go. Nope, that's wrong. That's definitely because I didn't even calculate the weight of the tray in. So and you may find that you're going to have different weights per tray. And if you look here, you can see the percentage of water for each tray. And what I've done here is you can see 79, 78.7, 78.5. But then on 3, you have an outlier. You can see that it's only 74.9% of removed water. So that is a cue that you can use to look and go, maybe that's something I should watch for next, or keep an eye on, because the others are within, 0.6 of a gram. So very tight tolerance, but then you've got one that is out 5.2 grams. There's a pretty big spread there between that one and the rest. And it will show me that, okay, I need to maybe be careful and watch this. And, when I package it. It's just information that I can use for, let's say I go back to another batch, or a few years down the road, I find that the 4 bags from tray 3, a couple of them were bad, and there was moisture left in the material. I can go back to the batch and the load and the tray, and I can see that I only removed 74.9% of the moisture, or 74.9% was water, and 79%, was, the others, approximately 78.7 were the others. So, big difference, and that would make me look, if I had an issue, go, okay, maybe I need to flag that spread and bring it closer. So if I see one that is way out, that pan is suspect, and maybe I'll put it in for more drying time to see if that helps to resolve the issue and tighten up the spread. So on this page, we filled out all the information, and now we're going to go over what it gives us. It will give us the total weight of the chicken before it was freeze-dried was 4,376 grams. After freezing, we had 970 grams of chicken. The average water percentage was 77.8, and we were 96.5% efficient in loading the machine to the 10-pound capacity. Down here you will see how much water we removed from this load. We removed 3,406 grams, or we're in America, so we still deal with the standard system of measurement. And for us, it's a little bit more common to understand 133 ounces. Basically, that equals just a smidge over 1 gallon. A gallon is 128 ounces. Now we come over to the information side, extra information. Our serving size is 91 grams in a bag, and that would be per person. The total number of servings in this batch is 48. The calories per serving is 83. Total calories is 3,982 for all of the chicken. The cost to purchase and process this food was $24.64. We have 3 servings per bag. You can see that we have the price per bag, which is $1.54, and that is for 3 servings. We have the price per serving, 51 cents. And this is the one that I really look closely for, and that is the price per calorie. The price per calorie for this chicken is 0.6 of a cent. A smidge over, but 0.6 of a cent. So it's not even 1 penny per calorie. The lower you get that number, the more cost effective you are. And I'm basing on what it would take to calorie intake in a situation that I need to use. So that's something that I need to monitor. In normal environments, you just eat until you're full. if you're in a stressful situation, you don't know when the event's going to be resolved, or you may not have a good understanding. So you want to use the resources that you have as efficiently as you can, which means not overeating. Data is variable on how many calories we need, from what I'm learning, based on where we live, our activity level, our gender or sexuality, whether we're male or female, whether we're active, inactive, and our age. All of those things factor into the number of calories that you need per day. And one thing that surprised me, the average, from what I'm understanding, is about 2,000. But they said, okay, this is approximately average. But if you have somebody who is working in the Arctic, they need 8,000 calories a day. So it varies. If you are older and you are female and you're not as active and not in as cold an environment, you may only need 12 to 1,400 calories a day. So you can't really say 2,000. There's so many variables in it, but I do want to know how many calories per serving and per bag. At some point in the future, we probably will count our calorie intake and find what our average is per day and our activity level. So we kind of have a basis to go on. If we get into one of those situations, we will know that I need 1,500 grams a day, my wife needs 1,250, and my daughter needs 1,700. Information is valuable. And that's why it's so important to me to understand the price per calorie, and, as you can see here, the calories per bag. Because if that was the only food that was, there, let's say it was in your car and that's all you had, you would know that that bag contains 249 calories. Also, how much water is needed to rehydrate the item to where it was prior to freeze drying. So I have water per bag in grams, and again in ounces, because it's easier for us to comprehend in a stressful situation. Ounces, because we can measure it with a measuring cup. And same thing per serving. I want to know how much water I need to add back in per serving. Because a person, depending on what it is, they may not eat the whole bag at once. So I know it's taken me a while to get to this point, but this data is important. And what would happen is this data we would save, and we come over to the labeling system that I've worked, which is automatic. And you can see that we have the contents, the batch number, the date that the process was started, the servings, the tray that it came from, and again, that goes back to lot traceability. You want to be able to trace back exactly where it came from in case there's a problem. Again, something from manufacturing, because of in automotive a safety item, or in medical defective part where you need to be able to trace back so you can pull it, or tell them that they need to be aware of this certain piece. Servings per bag, calories per serving, and I include the price per bag, and again, calories per bag. And then we go to the water. We can see that we need 213 grams of water, or 71 per serving, which equals out to 8 ounces or 3 ounces. And I just round these numbers higher, or by 0.5, so I don't have odd like 213.7. I let the system round it up or down, whichever it needs to be. And you'd have tray 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've talked about that we were going to have 4 bags per tray. So you would come up and you would print 4 sheets, because you have tray 1 on one sheet, and if you print 4 of them, then you have 4 1s, 4 2s, 4 3s, and 4 4s. That's the method that I use. The bags, once they're sealed, oxygen absorber put in, bag is sealed, label is adhered, I will reweigh the bag with the label attached, and I will write manually on with either a marker or a bigger pen, like a 0.7 or so, the bag weight. And I'm sure people have heard that you don't need to monitor bag weight, because spoilage is spoilage in the sense of you can't change matter. Matter is matter no matter what state it's in. Agreed. He is correct. But if you have a defect in the bag, whether it be in your seal, whether it be, in my case, once I had a cat who bit the corner of a bag and left a tooth mark, and the seal of the bag was compromised. So if you have a compromised bag and your material inside is freeze-dried, a fancy term for that material is called hygroscopic. And I'm butchering that word, I'm sorry. But basically, it means that it will draw moisture out of the air into the product until the item in the atmosphere reaches an equilibrium. Okay? A fancy term for meaning that this material has lower moisture content than the atmosphere. Okay? And if you draw in atmosphere or moisture, you're increasing the weight. So, yes, it will not tell you if your food is 100% good. But being able to monitor one aspect is a start. So if you have your weight is the same, you can say, okay, pretty sure my bag is not compromised. Now let's go on to the other issues. If you have spoilage and things change from a solid to a liquid to a gas, well, if you have a gas, you're going to have puffiness in the bag. That's a visual cue that you need to be suspicious of the bag. A couple visual cues with canning. If you have canned food and you walk to your pantry or your storage area and you want to pull out a can of stew, well, you just don't walk in, grab the can, walk out, and pop the top. When you first go in to look at that can, you visually inspect it to see if you see any contaminants on the outside. You look to see if there is severe discoloration on the inside. You look to see if the lid is still sucked in or if it's popped out. So if you see something on the outside of the jar and you see the lid popped up, chances are you're probably not going to open that jar. If you're smart, you're just going to take that jar, walk over to the trash, and you probably will have gloves on when you grab that jar and throw it away. Why? There's a higher probability of that can or jar having botulism and being compromised. One of the problems with botulism is it's not something that can be smelled as an odor. So you have to look at other cues. Second, with botulism, it is not the botulism itself that can hurt you. It is the spores of the botulism that hurt you. So, yes, you can kill botulism if you cook it, and you kill the spores. But opening that top, breathing in the botulism spores, can hurt you. You ask an old-time canner from, the 40s, 50s, when they were really canning heavy, what do they do if they see those conditions in a jar? Most of them will say they're going to throw that out. My wife's gotten chewed out for touching a can that had those conditions. So we're incorporating that information into how we treat our bags also. We see puffiness, we see weight change, that bag's going to be suspicious. If we open it, we're going to open it in a different manner than if we didn't see any of those conditions, if we even open it at all. Depending on the situation that we're in and the desperation will dictate a lot of things. So it's not one thing being 100% effective. It's an accumulation of different inputs that lead you to a conclusion. And as a side note, we're preparing for the what if. And if we're in the situation of a what if you get botulism, it's a very high likelihood that you're going to die from it. Botulism has a high mortality rate even if you're in the hospital, and it has severe complications. Not something to be messed with. Your food process needs to be stable, needs to be documented, and it needs to be thorough. One, you're dealing with your life. Second, you're dealing with your family and your kids' lives. Are you willing to put them at risk? This process can, if you don't. So, I feel it's important. We've gone through labeling, and we've gone through my inspection process. So once the bags are tagged and marked, I will come back over to the master sheet. I will highlight the rows. I will hit copy. And since this was going into raw protein, I will come over and make it over to raw protein. Come down to the next empty block, click on it, hit enter. I'm sorry, I did the wrong one first. I apologize. I will go to my log, which is my tracking sequentially of each load by what's run. I will come down to an open one, hit enter. This is my method of going back through to see what's gone on with a particular load. And this first load, batch 5, You can see the process date, the time that it took, the power. I was doing a calculated guess, a guesstimate, because I didn't have a kilowatt meter at this point. Raw chicken, raw protein, the quantity of bags, quarts. You can see the calories per gram, but you can see a difference here of efficiency. I ran a 43% efficiency on that load. If you look overall at this form, you can see a difference between this form and the one that I just worked on. And that will happen again and again as I see improvements that can be made to my process. What we would call it, these forms are not static. They're not set in stone. They're what we would call a living document. If you are doing something, you see something that can be improved or needs to be addressed, you go back and you make changes to the document to address those issues. And that becomes your new document. And then later on down the road, if you see that things change again and you need to change things, you do. You don't go in with the mindset, this is what I've got, this is what I'm going to stay with. Because as I scroll down, from this one to this one, you can see quite a bit of difference between the two. The layout is familiar, but I've changed information. And then this one is different, and then you get to what I finally showed you. And once we have done this, we still have one more, wrong one, one more thing we need to record, and that is the blue row that you see here. That is the information that I transfer to the storage locations. So I highlight the row, hit copy, then come down here and go to raw protein, next available block, hit enter. You can see the way that I've done my sheet. You've got batches, dates, contents, servings per bag, bags, storage location. And the reason I've done this is once I fill up a tote of raw protein 1, I will go to raw protein 2. And I also record which tray that item is from and who likes it. Let's say I like it. And I will put in the name. If it's the family that likes that meal, I will put in family. Or I will put the names of the people who like that meal. What this does in non-stressful situations, I can do a search to find a particular item based on criteria. And let me show you this, because this is actually interesting. I saw this on another person's site, and I gleaned it from him. So we'll go to find and go to special. Nope, wrong one. Let's try that again. There we go. We go to find. And let's say we want to find what we have with chicken. So we type in chicken. And within the sheet, search by rows, look in formulas. We want to do comments, I believe. And we're going by columns. So, let's see if what I remember is correct. Nope, I did something wrong, guys. Columns, but within the sheet, values. There we go. I was wrong, it was values. You can see here that in this sheet we have chicken raw and chicken raw. So you click on it and it can take you to it. See right there? It said chicken raw, servings per bag. I got 16. You can sort by name. Like, let's say we put in John Doolittle. It'll come up with everything that's John Doolittle. If we want to sort by date, we can sort by date. Ascending or descending. We can sort by alphabetical in contents if we want to sort ascending or descending. And what that does, it would place all the chickens together, all the shrimps together, all the eggs together, and again, all the milks together, so you can see what you have in inventory. One of the things that I like about this system is we've incorporated, if we're not in a stressful situation and we get to the point where we have storage enough that we're drawing out of the storage and putting storage in, just like a pantry, okay? And we use the computer to look up where it is, and let's say that I just wanted eggs. I know that I have 15 eggs that are raw per bag, and I've got 4 bags, and the storage location is raw protein 1. If I pulled one of those bags out, I would just subtract 1 out and hit enter, and my inventory shows me how much I've got. So it's a rolling inventory. To me, it's a real good system because it's updating as you search for food. You're not having to keep a log, go back in at some point, and enter all the changes. You do it as you're running the program, as you're getting food, as you're entering food and you're running batches, you're putting food in. So makes more sense to do it as you go. If you're in an event or situation, you wouldn't be concerned about monitoring quantity as much, because you'd be doing more visual. How much protein do I have? How much starch do I have? How much vegetable? How much drink? And you'd kind of keep that in your head, so you'd know how to ration for the longest, what you feel you need to use. We've gone to that. I'm going to show you what happens if you have a batch where one tray is loaded with one thing, another tray is loaded with another, and so on through the 4 trays. The first sheet that I came up with doesn't work. And this is what I was talking about with having it as a living document. I had that sheet set up, and for the first 8 or 9 loads, I ran all of one thing through the load. So that's where my mind was going. We ran this load, and we found that, whoop, we don't have enough for a full load. We're going to have to run 2 different items. How am I going to handle that? Well, I saw that there was a problem. I came in and I changed the sheet to address the issue of each tray having its own item. The sheet is the same information, just laid out differently. And you'll see that this is an actual batch that we ran. You can see that I've keyed in the date, the batch number, what it is. It was pre-frozen. Storage location for each tray. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go over the left-hand side, then I'll scroll right. The gross weight of the tray, the tare weight of the tray, and you can see this information is the same. It didn't change. You have your dryer checks, you have your efficiency, your water percentage, water removed, you have your notes, your price per kilowatt is the same, and the electricity per load. It costs me, again, on this load I didn't have my meter, so I was guesstimating it, and I said a kilowatt an hour roughly is what I guesstimated. So that's how it came up with the $2.50 for power usage. Here you can see we have tray 1, and we just continue the breakdown through. A little more. There we go. So tray 1, the contents of the tray was tuna, rice. The calorie per gram for this was 1.5. The information that I need was the calories, the price per calorie was 0.6 of a cent. It was actually 5.6 tenths of a cent, but 0.6 of a cent per calorie. I had 3 servings per bag, and I had 1 bag per tray. The size of the bags that I used was 1 gallon, and the cost for that tray for the tuna, rice, peas, cheese, and olives was $4.75. Breaks down to bag cost was 66 cents per bag. So it gives me a total of $6.04 for that meal for 3 people. And you can see the water in the bag by gram and by ounces and the total calories. All this information is the same, and you can see because I ran cheese chili, my calorie per gram is 1.3 and all the information, but we did change to quart bags, and we ran 1 bag per tray with 3 servings. So this information is the same, just a different layout. Again, the notes, and here, instead of 1 row of blue information, it's got 4. And that being if you had one storage location of MRE1 and something else in another storage location, you could break it down. In this case, I would take, after the batch was done, I would highlight the rows that are in the main sheet, hit copy, come back over to my log, click on it, come down to a free space, hit enter, and now I've got the data from that load entered into my log, and I would have to scroll over to get to all the information, but it is all contained right there. Once I was done, I would go back, highlight the blue rows, and since these are all going into MRE1, I would hit copy. I would come down to the MRE tab, come down to the empty row, hit enter, and then I would fill out who likes it. And this can be, this is what I chose, is who likes it. When you come up with your setup, you may have a different criteria, and that's fine. And you can see that I have the storage location it's in, and I know in this tab how much food I have. We go back to the main sheet, and we go to the labels of the main sheet. Again, the label is populated automatically from the information that I've input on the master worksheet. Has the information of batch, date, servings, tray, calories, cost, calories per bag, and then the water. And again, I would put the label on it after the bag was completed, weigh the bag with the label attached, and write down the weight of the bag. Again, here I would look at the number of bags per tray, and I would take the highest bag count for the tray. Let's say I had 2 trays that were 1 bag per tray. I had 1 tray that was 2 bags per tray. And the last tray was 4 bags per tray. I would take the 4 bags per tray and I would print 4 labels to cover the highest tray. Yes, there is waste in this method because you're having to go with the highest number. For me, I'm willing to accept that little bit of waste because of the time that it saves me in figuring out how to do it the other way. So this was just easier for me. We've gone over priceless calorie counts. There is one final thing that I want to go over. Let me back up to master working same, or log, I'm sorry. And there we go. Now that's the varied. There we go. This is a batch that I ran of the tuna rice as a complete load. And you can see the costs and the storage and everything else. But with this tuna and rice meal, it has tuna, rice, olives, black olives. It has English peas, and it has cheese. So how do I come up with this calories per gram to input when I have so many variables? Let's look at that. We come down to my recipes tab. The top left columns, A and B, that can be a descriptor. It can be who likes that meal. It can be storage location, however you come up with it. I'm choosing that I'll probably use who likes the meal, so when I do a find, if I'm trying to decide what I'm going to process, I can look and see who likes what do I have in the pantry, and go from there to put together a load for the machine. Here you can see again, tuna rice. It's rice and tuna. That's what my daughter called it. First ingredient is white rice. Was it cooked? Yes. All the materials were cooked. How much weight of the white rice did I put in? 521 grams. What was the calories per gram? Again, I had to go back to my calorie count sheet to see it was 1.3. I had canned tuna. How much tuna did I put in? Again, the calorie per gram. And all of this is automatic. I'm just inputting the yellow fields. So you can see I have my rice, my tuna, my olives, my peas, my cheese, and I even factored in the butter that I used to make the rice, because that is calories, so I'm going to include it in the end product. So I added all the weights, their values, and it calculated the calories per tray, gave me a total calories per tray, total weight, and it factored out to 1.6 calories per gram. And I built this system for me based off of one tray. So it tells me that if I make this item with the weights that I have posted, my load will be 93.8% efficient of the 10-pound load, or 2.5 pound per tray. If you save these items, like this recipe, it gives you something to fall back on when you make the next tray. You know that you need 521, 125, 70, 120, etc. for these items. If, let's say that you had 100 grams left of olives in the last tray that you were making, all you would have to do is enter 100, and it will adjust the calculation. Going from 70 grams of olives to 100 affected the calories per tray a little bit, but overall it did not affect the calories per gram. It did affect the efficiency. It brought it up to 96.5% efficiency. So this just helps me, and I keep a running log as I come up with a recipe that I use. I just input it into the computer so I can go back and replicate it. That is documentation. Okay. And that is pretty much my whole process of what I do. I'm sorry this took so long. If you stuck around with me the whole time, I hope this was helpful. If you have questions, please comment, and I will try to answer them in a timely manner. I do have a life, so, it may not be immediate. I wish you the best in your freeze-drying journey, and that it meets your expectations. Just go in with open eyes and have an idea of what you want as an end product. Thank you very much for taking your time out to spend with me. Have a good day.